If you want to understand the UFO mystery, you don't go to politicians first. You go to the man who was there when computers were still the size of rooms. You go to Jacques Vallée.
And he said, well, it lifted, and then it went off at an angle, and then it vanished. And I said, well, do you mean it vanished by just accelerating? He said, no, it just wasn't there anymore.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of The Briefing. Merry Christmas. I hope that you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Welcome to all the new subscribers. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing. Around here, we pull at all the hidden threads, testimony, history, and evidence most people never even hear about. Seeing him on Weaponized, it felt like a closing of the circle. Here is a man who is the real-life inspiration for the scientists in Close Encounters, sitting down with the guys who are currently leaking Pentagon videos. But Jacques doesn't talk about aliens. He talks about information. He talks about a reality that is far more layered and deceptive than we are prepared to handle. And then he starts dropping the bombshells. He isn't just speculating anymore. He's talking about the physical evidence, the materials that have been recovered. He mentions the 1945 San Antonio, New Mexico crash, the Trinity case. He talks about children watching an object go down, not just seeing a light, but touching the craft, seeing the occupants in distress. But it's the parallels that get you. He points out that these things don't just fly, they manifest. He draws a line between the 1945 case and the 1964 Socorro encounter with Lonnie Zamora. In both, you have these egg-shaped crafts on landing gear. In both, you have beings that don't act like explorers, but like technicians performing a ritual. He mentions the Valençon case in France where a farmer was paralyzed by a small being. It's the same pattern. They show up, they perform an absurd task, collecting plants, fixing a hole, staring at a witness, and then they vanish into a point of light. It's not the behavior of a traveler from Mars. It's the behavior of a control system, adjusting the thermostat of human belief. Jacques is telling us that these bombshells have been exploding for 80 years, but we've been too distracted by the fire to look at the fuse. He's telling us that the bizarre isn't a side effect of the phenomenon, it's the point of it. The more illogical it is, the more it bypasses our rational mind and sinks directly into our culture. He's been saying it since the 60s. The Pentagon is just finally starting to catch up to what Jacques Vallée already knew. The universe isn't just stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine. Jacques touches on a few critical points that I want to break down. If you haven't seen the recent Weaponized episode featuring Representative Burleson Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna, I highly recommend watching it. It gives you a clear picture of the current political battle for disclosure. George Knapp brought up the growing frustration with the gatekeepers, the people hiding the truth, but Jacques' take on this is surprisingly patient. He suggests that disclosure isn't going to be a single explosive event, but rather a slow leakage of reality into our culture. Vallée argues that the government might actually be just as confused by the phenomenon as we are. While politicians fight for transparency, Jacques believes the phenomenon itself, not the Pentagon, is the one deciding when the truth comes out, essentially using the government as just another layer of its control system. One point he made that really stuck with me is how limited Congress actually is. He mentions that while Congress is tasked with making laws, they are operating in a vacuum. They don't have access to the on-the-ground investigative data that he spent decades collecting. Jacques argues that you cannot understand the phenomenon through radar data or satellite photos alone. You have to look at the testimony of experiencers and witnesses. Without the human data, the government is trying to solve a puzzle while missing half the pieces.
As you know, I've spent a lot of my time going to meet people at their farm or in their house, gathering that kind of information. It's not what Congress is looking at. They are looking at pictures from fighter planes and satellites and all that. And they are looking mainly at the military because there is this idea that the phenomena may be a threat, which is a valuable, idea to look at. But that's not all. I mean, in many of the cases I have um, that are not published, the thing was not a threat. It was minding its own business.
What makes this truly chilling are the stories of reprisal against these whistleblowers. When you see someone like Representative Tim Burchett being told to back off or sit down regarding this investigation, it forces you to realize the terrifying lengths this shadowy element within the government will go to stop the conversation.
And then I have another member, not a member, excuse me, another member of the, I guess, the media told me that they had heard, they were literally concerned for my well being. And they said I needed to get bodies around me because I had kicked a hornet's nest on this thing.
It suggests that whatever is being hidden isn't just a simple secret, it's something massive. If they are willing to threaten sitting members of Congress and ruin the lives of high level intelligence officers just to keep a lid on this, then the truth has to be world altering. It reinforces exactly what Jacques is saying. We aren't just dealing with a mystery, we're dealing with a powerful structure that is terrified of the public realizing just how deep the rabbit hole goes. I first heard about the Trinity crash on Coast to Coast AM, and Jacques brings up some incredible details I never heard before. Specifically, he describes how this 1945 New Mexico crash involved young witnesses who looked inside the craft and saw what they described as this giant avocado, no visible engine, no control panels, nothing we recognize as technology. The real bombshell, though, was that the beings inside weren't calm, advanced explorers. They appeared to be in a state of total panic. Jacques also revealed that the recovered material was a specialized multi layered metal that served no known aeronautical purpose, predating the Roswell incident by 2 years. When you look at the parallels in modern cases, the weirdness remains exactly the same. Take the recent Las Vegas family who called the police about a craft in their backyard. One of the witnesses claimed the beings were wandering around the area almost aimlessly, even curiously interacting with the forklift as if they were trying to figure it out.
Angel says they heard the patter of multiple feet in the yard. They later heard footsteps on their roof. They saw one of the 8-foot-tall creatures climb behind the controls of a large front loader stored in the yard, as if trying to engage it.
You see this theme again with Jason Sands, who claimed an NHI in his encounter was desperately trying to source a specific metal just to fix its ship. Even in the Roswell accounts, there are stories of creatures running around the crash site in a frantic state. There's this constant theme of panic and absurdity. I mean, think about it. If you were from another planet or even another time period and you crashed, you'd be in full panic mode too. Imagine crashing a modern jet in 1865 during the Civil War. You'd be surrounded by a world you don't understand, desperately trying to survive. Jacques suggests this staged or panic behavior is part of the mystery, whether it's a real accident or deliberate performance designed to leave us baffled. I find it fascinating how cautious Jacques can be when it comes to saying, oh, that's an alien. They speak on the Fatima incident, and this got me thinking because I've always solidly believed it was a miracle or spiritual event. But he speaks on a witness who was not interested in watching this miracle and stated he saw a disc in the sky from the field he was in. Vallée uses this to show that phenomenon is multivalent, meaning it can appear as religious miracle to a believer and a physical craft to a skeptic at the same time.
There is testimony from somebody who was not interested in miracles. He was working in the fields a couple of miles away. He saw the sun was still in the sky, and he saw a disk between the sun and the cloud, and he testified to that extent. Unfortunately, there were no photographs in those days. It would have been very, very hard to have a camera that could capture that. There are photographs of the crowd, but not of the phenomenon itself, unfortunately.
By doing this, he argues that the miracle of the sun wasn't a message from heaven, but a mass scale manipulation of human perception by the same intelligence behind modern UFOs. And for those who don't know the Fatima incident, it refers to a series of apparitions in 1917 where three shepherd children in Portugal claimed to communicate with the Virgin Mary, culminating in the miracle of the sun, an event witnessed by 70,000 people who saw a spinning metallic looking disc plunge toward the earth and emit radiant colors that dried the rain soaked ground in an instant. Now, what if the apparition that appeared to the children to deliver the prophecies or messages or something else, an NHI or higher dimensional being? What were the prophetic messages? In his book, Invisible College, and later in Dimensions, Vallée argues that Fatima is the gold standard for how the phenomenon manipulates human society. In 1917, 3 children received the 3 secrets from what they believe was the Virgin Mary. Jacques Vallée argues this wasn't a miracle, but a high-tech manipulation of human belief. The first message was a vision of hell, a terrifying display of fire and demons. Vallée's take is the phenomenon uses extreme fear as a psychological hook to ensure the witness spreads the message rapidly. The second message, the rise of Russia in World War II, a prediction of global conflict and political upheaval. Vallée's take, this is a sociological conditioning. By predicting world wars, the phenomenon inserts itself into global politics, steering human history for decades. And then there's the last message that was withheld by the Vatican for years, then released, the assassination of the Pope, a cryptic vision of a bishop in white being killed. In Vallée's take, this is myth-making. By providing cryptic symbolic messages, the system keeps us obsessed with interpretation for generations, distracting us from the actual physical craft, the silver disc that was seen by skeptics in the field.
I've tried to pin you down on this question for as long as I've known you. It's about the control system, a theory that you proposed, a hypothesis you proposed more than 50 years ago, that there is some sort of a control system imposed on humanity, on Earth, from somewhere else, that it limits what we can do. And whether Earthlings are aware of it, whether they like it or not, it's there. Is there a way to test that? And have you done so?
To wrap it all up, the control system is Vallée's definitive answer to the why are they here question. He argues that we shouldn't view UFOs simply as visitors from another planet, but as a thermostat for human society, whether appearing as angels at Fatima in 1917 or as an egg-shaped craft near the first atomic test in 1945, the phenomenon is conditioning us.
Nature presents us with lots of control systems. This room has a control system, that controls the temperature. If I step out on the balcony, I'm going to get a completely different temperature. The temperature inside here is controlled. If I wanted to test it, I could light a fire, warm up the temperature inside and see if something controls it and dampens it down. So I can do a test of that. Of course, the environment is a series of control systems, and many people don't believe that the environment is changing.
It utilizes massive energy, like the megawatts recorded in the 1966 Haynesville case, to prove its physical reality, yet relies on absurd behavior to prevent us from ever truly grasping its origin. In Vallée's view, we are being managed by an interdimensional intelligence that guides the slow evolution of human consciousness through a deliberate mix of wonder and confusion. The idea that an external force is creating these boundaries to keep us in line is provocative. Is it just one species behind this? It's hard to say, but it brings to mind a case mentioned by Danny Sheehan or Dan Farrar in similar circles where an experiencer received a message from a non-human intelligence stating, "We don't know our full potential."
That's a control system. That it's not an evil group that's doing that. It's just the planet, is doing that. It's the environment. So UFOs could be from the environment. There could be plasmas. Many people say, there is many UFOs manifest the way plasmas would be manifesting.
This could be the key to the high-strangeness side of the phenomenon. It might explain why some people can remote view or tap into psychic powers. Perhaps we are being allowed to access these abilities only in controlled doses. It also suggests why certain individuals are chosen to interact with these beings. They may be acting as conduits for the control system's latest message to humanity. Ultimately, Jacques Vallée leaves us with the chilling realization: the UFO is not the destination, but the invitation. Whether it's the physical debris of the 1945 Trinity crash or the reality wrapping energy of the 1966 Haynesville encounter, the phenomenon refuses to be put into a box. It's not just them visiting us, it is a sophisticated control system that has been subtly nudging human culture since the beginning of recorded history. As we push closer to government disclosure, we have to ask ourselves, are we finally ready to see behind the curtain, or are we just following the script of an intelligence that is always 3 steps ahead? The truth isn't out there in the stars, it's right here, hiding in the bizarre, waiting for us to finally wake up to the nature of our own reality. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And that's all I've got for you today, guys. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and keep the conversation alive. And I'll see you on the next briefing.